2 hours and 20 minutes. That's how long it took the US to seize Venezuela's former leader, Nicolás Maduro, and his wife from their safe house in the Venezuelan capital, Caracas. But Operation Absolute Resolve had been finalized in early December. US troops had even created an exact full-size replica of the house to practice entry routes. Late on Friday night local time, the mission began. At first, there were loud explosions in Caracas around 2 a.m. on Saturday morning. Then, videos showing aircraft and explosions started to emerge. As the strikes were happening, US forces made their way to the city. More than 150 aircraft were used to get the extraction team there. Officials say they targeted air defense systems and military targets. We geolocated at least 5 locations from videos available online. Among the team was Delta Force, the US military's top special mission unit. Shortly after the strikes began, they reached the safe house after a CIA source who had infiltrated Venezuela's government helped the US track Maduro's location. It was at Fuerte Tiuna, a huge military complex where top government officials live, according to Venezuelan officials. Photos the next day showed bombed-out buildings and charred, smouldering cars. The former Venezuelan president attempted to flee to a safe room, but didn't make it in time. The Cuban government later said that 32 of its nationals were killed during the operation. Cuba has for years supplied Maduro with his personal security detail and his members in the Venezuelan military. At least 23 Venezuelan military personnel were also killed in the operation. And then these pictures. Maduro, handcuffed with headphones and a blindfold, on a ship called the USS Iwo Jima, on the way to the US. At the office of the US Drug Enforcement Administration in New York, and in court, pleading not guilty to charges including narco-terrorism. That's what's just happened. But how did we get here? First, you're going to need to know a quick history of Nicolás Maduro. He's the leader of the United Socialist Party and became president in 2013, taking over from his mentor, Hugo Chavez.
Nicolás Maduro was trained and sort of formed ideologically in Cuba when he was a union leader. He's got close ties with the Castro brothers and subsequently with Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel.
He was re-elected in 2024, but the US and many other nations say the election was rigged and his presidency illegitimate. He's increasingly repressed opposition groups and supporters and silenced any dissent in Venezuela, including with the use of violence. Nearly 8 million Venezuelans have left the country over the past decade, driven out by economic crisis, widespread shortages, and political repression.
The country has been in an intense humanitarian crisis. There has been extreme poverty, inflation, shortages of crucial things like medical supplies. Many feel like this is not just the result of economic mismanagement of resources, but also corruption too.
Last year, on the 8th of August, the US doubled the reward for information leading to the arrest of Nicolás Maduro, up to $50 million. The charges, including narco-terrorism, corruption, and drug trafficking, had been leveled against him in 2020, during Trump's first term. In 2025, they accused him of being one of the largest narco-traffickers in the world. Venezuela's foreign minister said the new reward was pathetic, calling it political propaganda.
Nicolás Maduro undoubtedly presided over a very, very corrupt government, very corrupt regime, very corrupt armed forces, and those are essentially still in place. The argument by Washington and by the Trump administration is that he himself was a drug cartel leader.
Maduro has always rejected US claims that he's directly involved in drug trafficking. Then, during the last couple of weeks of August, the US started moving warships into waters just off Venezuela. On the 2nd of September, Trump said 11 narco-terrorists had been killed in a US strike on an alleged drug trafficking vessel from Venezuela. This was the start of months of strikes, announced on social media, carried out against what the US say were terrorists attempting to bring drugs into the country by boat. The posts often included grainy video clips with no evidence of alleged drug trafficking and few details on who or what was on board. More than 35 strikes have been launched in the Pacific and Caribbean, killing more than 110 people. We've located some of the strikes here. With the exception of 2 survivors, a Colombian and an Ecuadorian national, none of the identities of those on board have been made public. Some experts say the strikes could violate laws governing armed conflict. The first attack by the US, back on the 2nd of September, drew particular scrutiny, as there was not 1 but 2 strikes, with survivors of the first killed in the second. Several legal experts told the BBC that the second strike on the boat by the US military was probably illegal and would likely be considered an extrajudicial killing under international law. The White House said it had acted in line with the laws of armed conflict to protect the US from cartels trying to bring poison to our shores, destroying American lives. By the 11th of November, a US naval strike force arrived in the Caribbean, including guided missile destroyers. And among it, the world's largest warship, the USS Gerald R. Ford, which carried more than 4,000 troops and dozens of aircraft. They joined a substantial military force already there, including thousands of troops and a nuclear-powered submarine. On the 24th of November, the US designated Cartel de los Soles a terrorist organization. At the time, they also alleged that Maduro headed the cartel, an accusation he has strongly denied. On the 10th of December, the US released clips showing what they say was the US military seizing an oil tanker near Venezuela. The White House said it'd been involved in illicit oil shipping. The Venezuelan government said the US kidnapped the crew and stole the ship. A few days later, a total and complete US blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers entering and leaving Venezuela. At the time, more than 30 of the 80 ships in Venezuelan waters or approaching the country were under US sanctions, according to data compiled by tankertrackers.com. After the tanker was seized, multiple new US sanctions on ships carrying Venezuelan oil were issued. A second oil tanker was seized on the 21st of December. On the 29th of December, the US said they'd carried out a strike on a dock area linked to alleged Venezuelan drug boats, but they didn't give any details or a location. The explosion was caused by a drone strike carried out by the CIA, according to CNN and the New York Times, who cited sources close to the matter. And that brings us to the 3rd of January, when the US seized Nicolás Maduro from Venezuela. So why did this all happen? And what other basis does President Trump have to claim oil from Venezuela?
Well, the US is still saying that this is about a couple of things, that it's about drug trafficking, but also now very much saying that this is about oil. Donald Trump has repeatedly used this phrase where he says that Venezuela stole US oil. Now, what he seems to be referring to there, that when Venezuela's oil industry was nationalized, there were some US companies who either had their contracts terminated or changed, meaning some of them had to pull out of the country. Some of them still feel that they are owed millions and millions of dollars of compensation that they didn't receive after that happened, which seems to be the basis behind Donald Trump's claim.
Ione, is it as easy as it sounds? Are these companies likely to return? What are the challenges here?
There are a number of concerns that oil companies have at the moment. One is political stability. Is it going to be risky if they invest in this country, if there could well be more political, social, economic turmoil in the years ahead? Two is a lack of infrastructure and investment. It's expected that it could take years before the infrastructure in Venezuela is really restored to the levels that it once was when some of these companies were operating there. And a third concern, I think, is security. There are concerns, and there have been, historical examples where there have been, for example, hostage taking connected with oil companies in Venezuela. I think there are concerns about whether there would be a backlash to US companies operating in the region from people who don't think that Venezuela's resources should be sold to the United States.
Well, there are obviously a few things to go through here. Nicolás Maduro is gone, but his inner circle, key figures of his regime, are still in place. What does this mean?
Well, let's look at who's become president. It's Delcy Rodriguez. That was his vice president. He was the man who promoted her to that role. She'd held a whole variety of roles before then, first under Hugo Chavez and then under Nicolás Maduro. For the Chavistas, a line has been very, very clearly crossed. They're furious that Washington will have done this in the 21st century, would have hit another country in the Western Hemisphere with airstrikes, would have removed a sitting president from power. And I think even those who would say, well, this man might have been in power, but he was there illegitimately, he should be gone, will be reticent about the way that it was done. The truth of the matter is that Washington displayed this awesome power that everybody knew they possessed. I think a lot of people were expecting, once they heard that Nicolás Maduro was gone, that Washington was going to install a sort of Maria Corina Machado presidency quite quickly. And that isn't the case. It's very, very explicitly not the case. Probably clearly the long-term plan is eventually get things on a more even keel, from Washington's perspective, I should say, to a point where they can have free and fair elections and she will be permitted to be a candidate. And then it's down to the Venezuelan people.